You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Today on the Useless Information Retrocast, you'll hear stories about a cat who was jailed while its two owners fought a custody battle over who really owned that cute feline. And then you'll learn about a nationwide problem from the 1950s in which people's clothing, it just seemed to instantly combust. Plus, you'll hear about an attempt to design shoes that would protect postmen from the effects of biting dogs, grabbing their ankles. Well, all those stories, today's retro sponsor, the question of the day, and so much more. It's all coming up next on today's Retrocast. I am Steve Silverman, and this is the Useless Information Podcast.
Useless information.
Everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I've selected what I believe are some really great stories for you, so I'm not going to delay. Let's dive right in. And the first story I've selected for you is from January 2nd of 1937. That's when the Atlanta Journal ran a front page story that turned quite a few heads. You see, a Persian cat named Jackie Lou had somehow landed in the Hapeville jail, and I guess I should add that Hapeville is a small city that lies south of Atlanta. So you're probably wondering, what crime did Jackie Lou commit? I mean, she's in prison. Well, surprisingly, none at all. In fact, there was even some doubt as to whether the feline in question truly was Jackie Lou. Well, let me explain. The saga began a few days early when Jackie Lou vanished from the Rossa Street home of her owner, Mrs. H.S. Berry. After a determined search, Mrs. Berry tracked her missing pet to a nearby tourist camp, and that's where she found the cat in the company of a man named Herman Reed, who just happened to be a traveler from Salina, Ohio, and had been passing through. Mrs. Berry, she demanded the return of her beloved pet, but Reed refused. He insisted the cat was his, not hers. Well, the disagreement quickly escalated, and that prompted the arrival of policeman Tom Clance, and he admitted that he was at a loss.
"I don't know whose cat she is,"
he told a reporter. But at that point, Mrs. Berry offered a key piece of evidence, and that was that her cat had recently given birth to kittens. But Reed countered that his cat had never had kittens. So to settle this dispute, they did the obvious. They got a vet. The vet came in and examined the cat. And while that investigation was underway, Mrs. Berry pressed charges against Reed for disorderly conduct, and that led to a hearing before police court recorder Neil Leach at 6 p.m. that same day. So what happened? Well, the vet concluded the cat had never had kittens. And with that, the charge against Reed was dismissed, and the judge ruled in his favor. What that meant was that the cat, whether Jackie Lou or not, legally belonged to Herman Reed after all. A January 1952 Associated Press article discussed a troubling phenomenon that had suddenly emerged across all of the United States. That was that peddlers were selling sweaters that spontaneously burst into flames, and that was causing both burns and widespread alarm. The story told of a young man in Los Angeles who had experienced this firsthand when a sweater he bought erupted in an explosive poof. Even worse, the city's Fire Prevention Bureau knew of at least a dozen cases involving these flammable sweaters, and those resulted in injuries to at least 8 individuals. Reports of similar occurrences surfaced in various towns and cities across the nation. Even Police Chief Philip Conley of Albany, New York, became a victim while examining one of these hazardous garments. He likened the experience to igniting, quote, a barrel of gunpowder, unquote. The sweaters in question were described as resembling jacket-type sweaters, button-down type rather than slipovers, and they came in various colors and were sold by these shifty characters for prices ranging from $3 to $24. Adjusted for inflation, that's around $36 to $290 today. Basically they were charging whatever they thought the customer would be willing to pay. It was thought that the explosive cloth, believed to be synthetic rayon, had been manufactured in New York City, and 2 sweater manufacturers in Providence, Rhode Island had since been identified. Simultaneously, the Bureau of Standards in Washington was diligently working to determine the cause of this combustibility, with a focus on the possibility that a dangerous flammable finish had been applied to those garments. At that time, and again this is 1952, California had already passed a law prohibiting the sale of clothing that was highly combustible, and there was similar legislation either passed or pending in more than half of the U.S. states. And while legitimate retailers refused to stock these garments, traveling peddlers operating out of their cars, they were able to sell their wares to these unsuspecting customers. When actress Jane Russell, one of the leading sex symbols of that era, learned of the exploding garments, she said,
"I've never thought about it much because I only wear sweaters informally, but now you've got me worried. I'm going to take my sweaters down to the studio prop department and have them fireproof them like they do the scenery."
So, did she ever get those sweaters fireproofed? I'm guessing not, but of course it did get her name into the papers. Anyway, just 1 year later, Congress enacted the U.S. Flammable Fabrics Act, and that regulated the manufacture of highly flammable fabrics just like rayon, and it applied to clothing, children's sleepwear, carpets, mattresses, and so on down the line. President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed that into law on June 30th of 1953. And I'll just throw in a personal story here, and that is years ago, my wife Mary Jane had a number of candles burning around the house. So she went to toss a pillow onto our bed, and I have to tell you, this pillowcase never came in contact with the flame. It just absorbed some of the heat as it passed by, and poof, the thing just burst into flames. It really was shocking how fast it ignited. Well, after that, we decided, do we throw out all the linens or do we throw out the candles? Well, we decided no more open flames in the house. We do not like candles anymore. And we do have that entire set still, although we don't have that one burnt pillowcase. So I ran upstairs and I checked, and if you're curious, they weren't made of rayon. They were 100% polyester. And the last original story that I've written for today is from August 3rd of 1956. It's reported that the National Association of Chiropodists, or chiropodists, depending on how you pronounce it, today we call those people podiatrists, they convened a meeting of delegates to address the challenges faced by mail carriers. More than 2,000 foot doctors and guests were registered for that convention. Apparently one of the major issues plaguing letter carriers, as highlighted by Dr. Raymond K. Locke, who was the chairman of the Council on Scientific Sections, were the, quote, 2 perils for postmen, unquote. And what those 2 perils were frequent dog bites and various foot problems, which of course included sprained ankles. In response to these concerns, the post office expressed a desire for a specially designed shoe of better construction, one that was better than what the typical letter carrier wore. They believed such footwear would help overcome these problems and suggested that a 3/4 length or low shoe would be more suitable. Consequently, delegates at the meeting approved a resolution to assign the development of dog bite-proof shoes to the association's research committee, which was headed by Dr. William F. Eads of San Diego, California. And then there was Dr. Abe Rubin of Washington, D.C. He served as both the association's secretary and as the editor of its official journal. And he said that the Postal Service would be establishing an industrial medical division, and once that was set up, chiropodists would be appointed to work at the various metropolitan post offices. A 2017 study by Elaine Sue and Hattie Shu analyzed the lyrics of Billboard's top 100 songs from 1964 all the way through to 2015. And what they were looking for was the most commonly used words, and also to see if those words had changed over time. Of course, they began by excluding the everyday words. We don't want to include the, and, us, we, I, I'm, and, so on down the line. But in the end, they determined that there was one word that had been the most popular through all those decades. Every single decade, it was the most popular word. So here's my question for you. Can you name the most common word that is used in song lyrics? Well, hang around for a bit and I'll let you know the answer at the end of this podcast.
Keep it clean with Energine. Ladies, here's a little household trick that smart women everywhere are finding of real value.
It's a simple, quick, and money-saving way to actually clean small articles like gloves, neckties, and scarves all over. Just gather up your smaller articles and dip them in a small bowl of Energine cleaning fluid. Squeeze lightly and hang to dry. That's all there is to it. We call it the Energine dip method. Get the surprise of your life at the beautiful cleaning job Energine will do this way. Just dip, squeeze lightly, and dry. Try it today.
And remember, ladies, to remove dirty grease spots from larger articles like dresses, suits, blouses, hats, even upholstery and rugs, Energine is unsurpassed. Makes even the most stubborn grease spots go right before your eyes in a jiffy. Just follow directions and Energine will clean your things, including such delicate fabrics as silk, rayon, velvet, and lace, without leaving telltale rings to mark the places where spots have been. Right now, put Energine on your marketing list. You can get it at your drug, grocery, or variety store. Remember, Energine gets it clean. So keep it clean with Energine.
That commercial for Energine cleaning fluid is from the July 3rd, 1947 episode of Backstage Wife. It was a soap opera that ran from August 5th of 1935 all the way through to January 2nd, 1959. I have to say that's quite the run. Anyway, the opening of each show described the premise of the show perfectly, so I'm not going to attempt to rewrite it. Let's take a listen.
Now we present once again Backstage Wife, the story of Mary Noble, a little Iowa girl who married one of America's most handsome actors, Larry Noble, matinee idol of a million other women. The story of what it means to be the wife of a famous star.
And clearly that's the life I'm living. My wife, she has to deal with the fact that I'm so incredibly handsome and the fact that millions of women adore me. Okay, not really. Instead, let's talk about Energine cleaning fluid. That's far more interesting. First thing I'm going to tell you, it's no longer being manufactured, and there's a good reason for that. It was made of 100% pure naphtha, which is definitely not one of the healthiest chemicals to be messing around with. If you do want to use naphtha, just head on over to the hardware store. They have it, with their paint thinners and the like. Now, the product was first introduced in 1906 by the James W. Cummer Company of Cleveland, Ohio. And among their products were Energine Shoe White, Energine Lighter Fluid, Energine Window Cleaner, and, I bet you think I'm going to say Energine again, but I'm not, it was Molay Shaving Cream. And I'm not sure if I've ever done a commercial for Molay. If I haven't, at some point I should. Of course, the company was incredibly successful, so in 1940 it was bought out. It was acquired by Sterling Products, and they later absorbed the Energine product line into their Decon division. Now, I'm not sure if Decon is available overseas, but Decon is basically pest control. How Energine fits in with pest control, I do not know. Well, one of the costs of your company being bought out is they tend to shut down local plants. They like to consolidate. And Sterling shut down the Energine plant in Ohio and moved everything to Brattleboro, Vermont 3 years later. The building that they took over was originally owned by Presby Leland Monuments, and they used it to cut granite there. And Energine would stay in that building until 1960, and that's when it was closed due to soaring freight costs. Interestingly, at least it's of interest to me, the empty Energine plant in Brattleboro was purchased by APW, that's the Albany Paperworks, and they occupied that building until 1983. Now, of course, I live right outside of Albany, and that's why I have a bit of interest. The original name of APW wasn't Albany Paperworks, it was Albany Perforated Wrapping Paper Company. As I've mentioned many times before, I taught science in Chatham High School in Chatham, New York for 30 years, and Seth Wheeler, the founder of APW, was born in Chatham. And he invented something I'm quite certain the vast majority of you have in your home. That is perforated toilet paper on a roll. It really was his idea to put those perforations in there and then put it on the dispenser. He actually invented the dispenser. And we proudly, I guess you could say proudly, we have one of those original toilet paper dispensers up in our bathroom. I should add that in the polite late 19th century, you couldn't use the name toilet paper, and that's why they called it perforated wrapping paper. And I'll throw in one last tidbit about toilet paper, and honestly, this will probably only mean something to people who live in the Capital District of New York, around Albany, Rensselaer, and Troy. That is that APW's main plant was what most locals would recognize as Huck Finn's warehouse. It was a gigantic furniture store, although they recently turned the bulk of that building into condos. In that building, APW made their two main products, and they did that up through the 1950s. That was paper towels, and you guessed it, toilet paper. Next up, I have 5 footnotes to history, and these all require no further research, so I'm just going to pretty much read them word for word. And the first one is from the April 15th, 1912 edition of the Birmingham News. This appeared on page 11. And before I read it, I should just tell you this is proof positive that initial news can sometimes be wrong. Very, very wrong. Headline on this one is, Titanic unsinkable. White Star Line head gives out formal statement. New York, April 15th. And I probably should throw in one little detail here, and that is that the Titanic sank at 2:20 that very morning. The story reads, P.A.S. Franklin, vice president of the White Star Line, gave out the following statement.
We place absolute confidence in the Titanic. We believe the boat is absolutely unsinkable, and although she may have sunk at the head or bow, we know the boat would remain on top. We do not attach any significance to the fact there are no Marconi messages being received from the boat. We think it denotes nothing but the fact the boat is in communication with other steamers, for she may have gotten off all the messages she wanted to send. We figure the Virginian of the Allen Line will be alongside the Titanic soon, and we figure the Olympic of the White Star Line will closely follow or arrive at 10 o'clock tonight. The Baltic is nearby.
Mr. Franklin also said after giving his formal statement that the officials figured the boat 1,080 miles from New York and 600 miles from Halifax. Mr. Franklin said he received a brief wireless dispatch from the Olympic saying she had talked by wireless with the Titanic at 4:24 o'clock this morning. The message gave no further information, Mr. Franklin said. This message showed conclusively that the Titanic was still afloat 6 hours after the reported accident. I guess that was reassuring, but in reality the ship sank about 2 hours and 40 minutes after it hit the iceberg. This next story appeared on page 10 of the Wilkes-Barre Times Leader on October 19th of 1918, and World War I was still going on at that point. It would end less than a month later. The headline reads, Peroxide Blonde hard hit by war. Paris, October 19th. War has taken a heavy toll among blonde-haired women of Paris. Brunettes are getting numerically stronger every day. Peroxide of hydrogen has gone sky high in price. Necessities of war chemistry have made it scarce. A couple of francs would buy a large bottle of it before the war. Now it costs so much that thousands of blondes have given up the unequal struggle and are allowing nature to take its course. Now we have a story from May 29th of 1937. This appeared on page 14 of the Tacoma News Tribune. Headline is, New Taste Given to 1937 Spinach. And before I read this, I should point out there's a large picture of a boy eating a bowl of spinach, and he has a big smile on his face. Thousands of children will soon look as happy as young Billy Tracy because there's a new kind of spinach. This triumph has been announced by horticulturist Harry Bateson of Long Beach, California, who has succeeded in crossing the old-fashioned spinach with a common garden weed. Wow, that sounds delicious, doesn't it? Anyway, Bateson said,
So many children and grown-ups disliked ordinary spinach that I experimented for a number of years trying to create a plant with few fibers and no prickles. The new spinach is delectable. It's pleasant. Why, after one mouthful, no sensible child will ever be fooled by the other variety.
Billy Tracy, age 7, likes a bowl of this new vegetable for breakfast, prefers it to bananas and cream. He adds a dash of salt and pepper and begins the serious business of eating a full meal, he said.
This may be spinach, but it tastes good.
The new plant has not been named, and its inventor wants to find a title which will remind no one of spinach, Bateson declared.
Moreover, my discovery combines the virtues of mustard greens, turnip greens, and true spinach.
He expects that horticulturists will profit because this unique plant will germinate from seed in 40 hours. Next, we have a story from November 28th of 1956. This was published on the front page of the Elmira Star-Gazette. The headline is Judge Scents 1 cent Error, and that second word sense is like smelling scents. So Judge Scents 1 cent Error, Ennis, Texas Associated Press. City Judge George Davis got the last laugh when several out-of-town teenage boys recently paid off a $10 speeding fine in pennies. The youths bragged over town they would enjoy watching Davis count out 1,000 copper coins. The judge ran the pennies through a fast parking meter coin counter and found the boys had overpaid by 1 cent. Davis cleared the case by refunding the penny. And the last tidbit for today is from May 28, 1966. This was published on page 18 of the Miami Herald. The headline on this one reads, In Poetic Justice, Roses are red, defendant is blue. Tampa, United Press International. A poetic defendant brought before City Judge James Calhoun on a drunken charge got the first laugh in with his verse accusing the judge of drinking, but His Honor got the last laugh. The man leaned on the bench and quoted, Roses are red, violets are blue. Judge Calhoun drinks more wine than I do. When the judge finally stopped laughing, he retorted, Now I have one for you. Roses are red, violets are blue. You got 60 days in city jail to do. So early in the podcast, I'd asked if you knew the most common word used in songs. And this comes from a 2017 study by Sue and Shu, and they concluded that the most commonly used word was, did you know? Love. That's it, love. And the second most commonly used word was baby. And just like love, that has remained unchanged throughout the decades. Of course, what that means is that the song Baby Love nailed it. He managed to get both of the most popular words in its 2-word title. As for the third most common word, that has varied a bit over the years. In the 1960s, it was yeah, and then in the 70s and 80s, the third most common word was time. In the 90s, it went back to yeah, then it was girl in the 2000s, and once again it reverted to yeah in the 2010s. The two also looked at bigrams and trigrams, which are double and triple repetitions of words, and I'm not going to go through them individually, and I'm not even sure they really qualify as words because they were either la la, la la la, that's the trigram, yeah yeah, or yeah yeah yeah, and na na, and na na na. Okay, as I said, I'm not sure if those really qualify as words, but not surprisingly, their study found that after the 1990s, songs included lyrics that were not only increasingly more profane, but they were also less sophisticated. Lastly, they found that the proportion of positive and negative sentiments, that remained similar throughout the decades. Now, I interpret that to mean something like, Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You, which of course is made famous by Whitney Houston. That song would be extremely positive in its sentiment, while at the other end of the spectrum, for example, we have I Hate Myself for Loving You by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Well, that brings the 33rd edition of the Useless Information Retrocast to a close, and I do hope you enjoyed the stories that I selected. Now, I've purposely recorded this episode about 10 days before its release date. That's pretty rare for me, and that's just so my wife and I can take a short vacation. And you may wonder, where are we going? To Rochester, New York, which is actually a very nice city. It's about a 3.5-hour drive from our house. Now, I did attend the University of Rochester between 1985 and 1987 to get my master's degree, so I have a vague familiarity with the city. When I say vague, I mean very vague. I haven't been back there in probably close to 30 years. I should also note that I scheduled this episode to premiere the day after I get home. So as you're listening to this, we're already back. And that's just because it's very hard to deal with something going wrong when I'm away from home. And things have gone wrong in the past. I wake up and it's like, holy cow, I did something wrong. So I just scheduled it to be the day after we get back. Just a reminder, if you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to follow the podcast. That's what we used to call subscribing. And you can do that through your favorite podcast app. That can be Apple, Spotify, or whatever app you're using. And if you can leave a positive comment about this podcast while doing so, that would be greatly appreciated. It really would. The Useless Information Podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network, so be sure to visit airwavemedia.com, and there you'll find a curated selection of some of the best podcasts out there. Anyway, I'll be back soon with a full-length episode. Until then, happy Easter or Passover or whatever you celebrate. Just stay healthy, happy, and enjoy your time with your family. As always, thanks for listening, and take care, everyone. Bye.